I was somewhere in the middle of Kansas, at least I think it was Kansas, because the highway signs had started to blur together 100 miles back and my GPS had died an hour earlier. I'd been driving for close to 12 hours, pushing myself to make it another state closer to the job I'd lined up. But my eyelids felt like lead, and every time my head dipped forward, I caught myself just before drifting into the other lane. I knew I couldn't keep going, not without risking killing myself. So when I saw the glow of neon in the distance, a half-lit sign that just read motel with the O flickering on and off like a bad pulse, I took the exit and pulled into the gravel lot. The building was squat, long, with about 12 rooms stretched in a row, and a rusted soda machine humming by the office. There were a few cars scattered around, but I didn't see anyone outside. The office door creaked when I opened it, and the smell hit me immediately. A mixture of stale cigarettes and something sweeter underneath, like rotting fruit. Behind the desk was a man with pale skin and thinning hair, wearing a yellowed button-up that looked 2 sizes too big. He smiled without showing teeth and asked how long I'd be staying. Just one night, I told him. He slid a brass key across the counter, not a card, an actual key, which felt wrong in 2025, but I was too tired to care. Room 6. He said it like it meant something. I hauled my bag out of the car and noticed then the others, people just standing in the lot, far off in the shadows, not moving, just facing the building. I told myself they were probably smoking or maybe just stretching their legs, but none of them spoke or turned when I walked by. The room itself wasn't terrible at first glance. The usual thin bedspread, faded curtains, carpet that smelled faintly of mildew. But the TV in the corner flickered on the moment I closed the door behind me, buzzing with static. I tried turning it off, but it clicked back on after a few seconds, the static shifting like it was trying to form shapes. I yanked the plug from the wall and left it dead, then sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my eyes. That's when I noticed the painting above the dresser, a cheap print of a cabin by a lake, nothing special. But as I stared, I realized the water in the painting wasn't still. The ripples were moving. I blinked hard, and the picture froze back into place like nothing had happened. I told myself I was overtired, hallucinating. I pulled the curtains shut and tried to get some sleep, but I couldn't. The wallpaper had a strange pattern, little diamond shapes, and the longer I looked, the more they seemed to twitch, like they were shifting positions every time I glanced away. I finally lay down and forced my eyes shut, but it didn't help. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps pacing right outside my door, slow and deliberate, back and forth, back and forth. I got up and peered through the peephole, but the parking lot was empty. The footsteps kept going. When I opened the door, heart pounding, there was no one there. But the people who had been standing out in the lot earlier were now closer, maybe 20 feet away, still staring at the motel. None of them moved when I whispered hello. I shut the door fast and locked it. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At first light, I grabbed my bag, threw it in the car, and tried to drive out. But after following the road for 10 minutes, it bent sharply and spit me back in front of the motel again, the neon sign buzzing like it had been waiting for me. That was the moment my stomach dropped. I wasn't just tired, I wasn't just imagining things. I couldn't leave. The motel wouldn't let me. By the second night, I realized sleep wasn't an option. I sat on the bed, my bag still by the door, like I might be able to make a run for it at any second, and stared at the ceiling while the motel seemed to breathe around me. That's the best way I can describe it. The walls gave off this subtle groaning, a sound like pressure shifting in old wood, except it wasn't old wood. It was alive, stretching, contracting, like the whole place was inhaling and exhaling. I kept trying to tell myself it was just my exhaustion playing tricks, but every time I blinked, I'd hear it again, timed almost perfectly with my own breaths, until it felt like the motel was trying to sync itself with me. I thought about driving off anyway, even if the road looped back, just flooring it until something gave. But when I looked out the window, the parking lot was full. Cars that hadn't been there before. Old models, rusted and decayed, like they'd been sitting untouched for decades. Some of them had luggage still piled in the back seats. And the people. There were more of them now, not just a handful. At least 2 dozen, all standing the same way, facing the motel, not moving, not speaking. My pulse hammered when I realized their heads weren't turned toward the building anymore. They were angled up directly at my window, I backed away fast and nearly tripped over my bag. That's when I heard it. The TV I had unplugged the night before had turned itself back on. This time there wasn't static. There was a video playing, old, grainy, like a home recording. A family sitting on a motel bed. This motel bed, same bedspread, same faded wallpaper. A man, a woman, 2 kids. They were smiling at the camera, but then the father's smile twitched and froze, and the kids started crying silently, their mouths open but no sound. The mother stood and walked off screen. The father followed. The kids sat on the bed, their crying frozen in an endless loop. Then, the tape cut out. The screen went black, but I could hear muffled voices still playing from the speaker, voices that weren't in the video. I got closer, straining to hear. They were whispering my name, over and over, just my name, in a dozen different tones. Some sounded angry, some sounded pleading, some sounded exactly like my own voice. I yanked the cord again, threw the whole set across the room, and for a moment I thought it was over. But the whispers didn't stop. They had just shifted. They were in the room with me now, coming from the walls, coming from the vents, coming from behind the painting of the lake. I ripped it down, but instead of a blank wall, there was another layer of wallpaper beneath. The same diamond pattern, except this time, the diamonds were open like eyes. And when I leaned closer, I realized they weren't painted. They were moving, blinking, watching me. I dropped the frame and stumbled back. My throat was dry and my legs shook as I pressed my back against the door. But when I glanced at the handle, I froze. The lock was slowly turning on its own. Something was unlocking the door from the other side. The lock clicked with a sound too deliberate to mistake for anything mechanical. My chest tightened as the knob began to turn. Slow at first, like whatever was on the other side, wanted me to hear every creak, every shift of metal against metal. I pressed my weight against the door, palms slick with sweat, but the knob kept twisting until it stopped halfway, frozen like whoever was out there was savoring the moment. Then came the knock. Not a human knock. This was too flat, too hollow, like knuckles against something that wasn't wood. The sound didn't echo normally. It spread through the walls, through the floor, reverberating in my ribs. I whispered to myself, "Don't open it," over and over, a mantra, though my voice was trembling so badly it barely sounded like me. Then, to my horror, the whisper from the walls answered back in unison. "Don't open it! Don't open it!" They were mocking me, or warning me. I couldn't tell. The air in the room had shifted. It was thicker, pressing down on me like I was underwater. I thought about the window, about throwing the chair through it and climbing out, but when I looked that way, I saw something that froze me in place. The crowd of people outside wasn't facing the motel anymore. They were all looking up again. No, not up. Their necks were bent backward, mouths wide open, as if they were feeding on the night sky. Their bodies convulsed in perfect rhythm, like marionettes on invisible strings. A sound seeped in through the glass, a high-pitched droning hum that grew louder until it overpowered the whispering. I turned back to the door just as the knob completed its turn. The door cracked open, only a sliver, but enough for me to see the hallway outside. And what I saw didn't belong in any hallway. The wallpaper wasn't the dull, beige pattern I remembered. It was covered with faces, hundreds of them, stretched into the surface, their features flattened but still moving, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Some of the faces I recognized, the family from the tape, the motel clerk, even strangers I couldn't place, but they all shared the same desperate, pleading eyes. As I stared, a cold draft slid through the gap, carrying with it the faint smell of rot and something metallic, sharp, like blood left too long in the air. My instincts screamed at me to slam the door shut, but before I could move, a hand slipped through the crack, pale, too long, the fingers jointed in the wrong places, bending forward instead of back. The nails were black, sharpened, and when they curled against the inside of the door, the wood splintered. It didn't push the door open further. It didn't need to. The thing on the other side was just waiting. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the TV's shattered remains, as the whispers changed. They were clearer now, more urgent. Let it in. Let it in. But beneath that, another voice whispered louder, clearer, cutting through the rest. It sounded exactly like me. Don't let it in. My head spun. I pressed my palms against my ears, but the voices were inside, bouncing around the folds of my brain. I screamed more to drown them out than anything, and grabbed my bag. Without thinking, I lunged for the bathroom, slammed the door, and locked it. The mirror above the sink was cracked, but it still showed my reflection, pale and frantic. I sank to the tile floor, bag clutched to my chest, as the sound of claws scraped against the main door. Then, silence. I thought maybe it was gone. My heart began to steady. But when I looked up at the mirror again, my reflection wasn't sitting like me anymore. It was standing, right behind me. The reflection grinned before I could even react. Its mouth stretched too far, corners tearing upward until its cheeks split. My body froze, paralyzed in a way that wasn't natural, like my muscles were no longer mine. I watched as the reflection placed its hands on the inside of the glass, pressing forward. The mirror's surface rippled like water. Then I felt it, fingers brushing the back of my neck, though nothing was behind me. The reflection leaned closer, tilting its head, eyes hollowed out but locked onto mine. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a hoarse rasp. The glass bulged outward, swelling like something was trying to crawl through. A wet, cracking sound filled the bathroom, and then snap! The first hand broke through. Shards rained down into the sink as the reflection pulled itself out, piece by piece. Its body looked like mine, but wrong. Twisted at the joints, skin too pale, movements too deliberate, like a marionette learning how to walk. I stumbled back into the corner, knees shaking, whispering, "This isn't real. This isn't real." But my reflection, no, the thing pretending to be me, spoke in my voice. It is real. It's always been real. You just refused to see it. The walls shuddered with the sound of laughter. Some mine, some not, layered over each other until the whole room vibrated. The thing stepped closer, reaching out its broken-fingered hand, and I realized with sudden clarity, this was never about surviving the night. This motel wasn't a place. It was a trap, a filter. People came in and only one version of them left, the one that belonged to this side. My hand brushed against my bag, and I remembered the old motel key still inside. Without thinking, I grabbed it, clutching the cold metal like it was holy. The moment I raised it, the reflection hissed, stumbling back. The walls pulsed, faces stretching, screaming soundlessly. The key glowed faintly, a dull orange, like a dying ember, and in that instant, I understood. The key wasn't to the door of the room, it was to the exit none of us were supposed to find. I lurched forward, ramming the key into the cracked mirror. The glass split open, not shattering, but peeling apart like a wound. Beyond it was darkness, endless and alive, pulling at me with invisible hands. The reflection lunged, shrieking in my voice, but I didn't hesitate. I dove through the wound, clutching the key, and the motel vanished in a rush of cold. When I opened my eyes, I was standing on the side of an empty highway. My car was gone, my phone was gone. Just me, the clothes on my back, and the motel key clutched in my fist. Behind me, where the motel should have been, there was nothing but flat fields stretching into the night. Silence, no lights, no building, no crowd, nothing. I should have felt relief, but I didn't. Because when I looked at the reflection in a nearby puddle on the asphalt, it didn't move with me, it just stood there, smiling.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales.
It started with a sound I thought only I could hear. At first I chalked it up to stress, maybe lack of sleep. A faint hum, low and constant, like the kind you'd hear standing near a transformer box or power lines. But there were no power lines near my apartment. Just thin walls, flickering light bulbs, and a perpetually leaky faucet that annoyed me more than anything else. The hum seemed to seep in during quiet moments, those spaces between thought and action. At night, lying in bed, it crawled into my ears, a deep vibration that felt less like hearing and more like sensing, like it was inside my bones. The first few nights, I tried to ignore it. I'd play music, watch videos, anything to drown it out. But the second I hit pause, the sound returned, worse than before, louder, sharper, and it began to warp. The hum bent into syllables, broken fragments of something trying to be speech, whispering but never forming complete words. I couldn't make them out, but somehow I understood they were directed at me. At first, I laughed nervously to myself, muttering that I was going insane. Work stress, loneliness, too much time staring at screens. But the more I tried to rationalize it, the stronger the whispers became, filling the silence like a parasite. 3 days passed where I barely slept. My apartment started to feel like a cage. Every time I turned everything off, the fridge humming, the air conditioner blowing, even my phone buzzing, the whispers surged, filling every corner of the room. It wasn't just noise anymore. They carried weight, intention, like something was waiting for me to stop making sound, to just listen. On the fourth night, I broke. I shoved earbuds in and blasted static just to feel something normal. But when I pulled them out to go to the bathroom, the whispers weren't muffled. They were clearer. They had grown teeth. I heard my name, over and over, spoken in dozens of overlapping tones. Low, high, male, female, old, young. Some voices sounded like people I knew. My mother, my old high school teacher, a woman I once dated, even people who had been dead for years. They all whispered my name over and over, dragging it like nails against glass. I sat on the floor, holding my head, whispering back at them. Stop, stop, please stop. That's when I realized it wasn't just in my apartment, because outside, through the thin blinds of my window, the whole block was silent, dead silent. No cars, no footsteps, not even the buzzing of the street lamp. It was like the world outside had been swallowed. I pressed my forehead to the glass, staring at the empty street, and that's when I saw him. Sitting at a bus stop across the road, a man in a black coat, tall, still, unnervingly still. He didn't move, didn't shift, didn't even breathe. But the closer I looked, the more I realized it wasn't that he was quiet. It was that the air around him refused to make sound. Even the night itself seemed to die near him. I backed away from the window, my chest tightening. My heart pounded in my ears, the only sound left. And then I heard it. A single sentence whispered into my skull. Not from outside, from the silence itself. You've been feeding it. I didn't sleep after that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the weight of that figure outside pressing against my skull. The whispers never stopped either. They layered into one another, 1,000 broken voices, until I couldn't tell where my own thoughts ended and theirs began. But the words it spoke to me, that single sentence, kept replaying. You've been feeding it. I didn't understand what it meant, not at first. Feeding what? I hadn't left my apartment in days. I hadn't spoken to anyone. My fridge was empty. I was surviving on stale crackers and tap water. What could I possibly be feeding? But then, sometime past 3 a.m., the whispering cut out. Not faded, cut. Like a switch was thrown. The sudden absence of sound was worse than the noise. My ears rang with the pressure of nothingness, and I stumbled to the window again. He was still there, the man in the black coat. His head tilted slightly, as if he knew I was watching, and this time, he moved. Just a small shift, but it was enough. He raised a hand, lifted one finger, and pressed it to his lips. The gesture sent ice through my veins. My chest seized, and against my will, I obeyed. I covered my mouth with both hands, muffling even my breathing. And when I did, the silence deepened, like the whole city bent around me. That was when I heard it clearly for the first time. Not whispers, not fragments. A voice clean and sharp, like it was standing right beside me. They starve in the noise. They feed in the quiet. And you've been feeding them well. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat locked up. and some primal instinct told me speaking would be a mistake. The figure at the bus stop tilted his head again, just slightly, before lowering his finger. Then, impossibly, without ever rising, without ever standing, he was closer. One blink, and he was halfway across the street. Another blink, and he was in front of my building, standing beneath the burnt-out street lamp. I backed away from the window. My body screamed to run, to get out, but I couldn't hear my own footsteps. Couldn't hear the floor creak. I couldn't even hear the thud of my own heartbeat. It was like the silence had reached inside me and stolen the sound before it could leave my body. The voice spoke again, sharper now. You don't remember, do you? When you stopped filling the world with sound? When you let the gaps linger? That's when we came. That's when he took interest. I didn't want to ask who he was. But the question formed in my mind anyway. And in the space of that thought, the voice answered, the broker. The one who collects the quiet. And now, he's collecting you. The figure was at my door now. No footsteps, no knocking. Just there, a shadow beneath the crack. I bolted to the kitchen, grabbing the first thing I could find, a knife. My own ragged breathing rattled in my chest, and for a brief second I heard it. The sound of me, real, alive. But the second I gripped the knife tighter, it vanished again. And then came a new sound, faint, brittle, like glass cracking under pressure. I looked down at the blade in my hand. The metal was splintering, warping, as if silence itself was eating through it. I dropped it, and the knife shattered on the floor. No noise, no clatter, just a puff of air and nothing more. The shadow at the door didn't move, didn't push, didn't try to break in. But the voice spoke one last time before everything went black. Do you know what's left of a person when all their sound is gone? I didn't get to answer, because the world blinked out, and when I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was in a place where silence had a shape. When I came to, it wasn't like waking from sleep. It was like drowning and suddenly realizing you don't need air. The first thing I noticed was the weight, not gravity, but silence itself, pressing against my body like water pressing into lungs. I tried to scream just to break it, but nothing came out, not even the shape of breath. My throat moved, but it was as if sound had been erased from me completely. The world around me wasn't dark, but it wasn't light either. It was muted. A colorless place, flat and endless, stretching in every direction with no horizon. The floor beneath me looked like glass, but each time I tried to walk, ripples spread out beneath my feet, waves of silence rolling outward. And then I saw them. Figures, countless figures, all standing in neat rows, stretching into the infinite. Men, women, children, all still, all frozen, all with their mouths open wide in eternal screams. Their faces were locked in expressions of terror, but no sound escaped. The silence around them wasn't passive. It was devouring them, locking them into statues. That was when I understood what the voice meant. These weren't corpses. They were people emptied of their sound, of their voices, of their very existence. A new ripple moved across the glass floor, one that didn't come from me. I turned, and there he was, the broker. He was taller than I remembered, too tall for his proportions to be human. The black coat hung from his frame like it was stitched together from shadows, and where his face should have been, there was only smooth, polished glass, a mirror, and when I looked into it, I didn't see my reflection. I saw the inside of my apartment. I saw myself curled on the couch, rocking back and forth, my lips trembling but making no sound. The broker's voice came without air, slamming directly into my skull. "You've brought me much!" I shook my head violently, trying to back away. My feet slipped across the glass, sending more ripples into the silence. But he only followed, each step stretching reality. No sound. Not even the brush of his coat. Every pause you allowed. Every silence you filled with fear. I fed. The voice wrapped around me like a snake, squeezing my mind. Now I will take the rest. I tried to form words, but they died before reaching my lips. I clawed at my throat, desperate to force something out, anything. But it was useless. I couldn't make a single sound. The broker raised one long hand, palm open. In his hand, I saw it. A small, pulsing knot of light. My voice, my sound, my very essence. It twisted and writhed in his grip like a trapped animal. Muffled cries echoing faintly from within it, my cries. I fell to my knees, reaching for it, but he pulled it back, holding it above me like a cruel parent, teasing a child. The rows of silent figures all turned their heads at once, their empty mouths gaping wider. They were waiting, watching, hungry. That's when he spoke again, softer now. But I am merciful. I will offer you a trade. I will return your sound if you give me theirs. He gestured to the frozen people around us, his hand sweeping over thousands, millions of silenced souls. My chest tightened. He wanted me to choose, to condemn others in my place. The knot of light pulsed harder in his palm, crying out faintly for me to take it back. My lungs burned, my throat ached. Every part of me screamed to reclaim what he had stolen. But in that silence, I understood the trap. If I fed him, I would only become what I saw reflected in the glass floor. A vessel of silence, another broker in waiting. The broker leaned down, his glass face inches from mine. In its reflection, I saw not just myself. I saw the faces of everyone I had ignored, every phone call I hadn't answered, every conversation I had cut short, every silence I had left hanging. They stared back at me, accusing, trapped inside him. And then, for the first time since I arrived, I heard a sound. A faint, tiny sound. My own heartbeat. It was weak, but it was mine. I clenched my fists. If I still had that, maybe I wasn't completely his yet. Maybe silence hadn't taken everything. The broker's voice thundered one last time. Choose them or you. And with that, the knot of my sound burst open in his hand, unraveling into threads that snaked toward me and the frozen figures, wrapping around us all. The choice was ripping itself from my body, whether I wanted it or not. The threads of light tore through me like fire, latching onto my chest, my throat, my ears. They tugged in both directions, toward me and toward the frozen souls around us. I understood then. The broker wasn't simply offering me a choice. He was forcing it. If I resisted, the silence would swallow me whole. If I gave in, those people would become nothing more than echoes in his collection. The broker towered over me, glass face tilting, reflecting every angle of my fear. My heartbeat quickened, loud now, almost deafening inside the realm of silence. It was the only proof I still existed. I pressed my hands over my chest, holding onto that pulse like a lifeline. The light threads pulled harder, demanding I let go. The faces around me trembled, their mouths open wide, silently begging me not to condemn them. Choose, the broker hissed inside my skull. His voice cracked the air like stone breaking bone. Survive, or dissolve. For a moment, I nearly caved. My lungs ached for breath. My body begged for sound. I wanted my voice back, to scream, to weep, to laugh, to simply speak one word. But as the threads strained, as the choice dug claws into me, I realized something. The broker wasn't truly offering me life. He was offering servitude, a chain disguised as mercy. In the silence, it wasn't empty. It was alive, feeding, waiting for me to give in. So I did the only thing left. I opened my mouth, and with everything I had, I forced my heartbeat outward. Not words, not a scream. Just that pounding rhythm, raw and primal. At first, it was a whisper in the void. Then louder, stronger. Each thud cracked the silence like glass. The broker staggered, his body rippling, the mirror face warping under the vibration. The frozen figures turned toward me, and for the first time, their mouths closed. Their faces relaxed, as if remembering they once belonged to something alive. The silence shrieked in fury, recoiling like smoke from flame. The broker lunged at me, glass hand reaching for my chest. I pressed both palms against his mirror face and forced my heartbeat into him. Thud, thud, Thud. Cracks spread across the glass. Behind them, I didn't see my reflection anymore. I saw the void itself, endless and hungry, writhing in pain at being denied. The broker let out a sound at last, not a voice, but a tearing howl of broken silence. And then he shattered. The glass face exploded into fragments, scattering across the floor like shards of frozen time. The rows of silenced souls crumbled, dissolving into threads of light that scattered into the void, free at last. The weight crushed me all at once, pulling me downward, drowning me in my own pulse. I thought I was gone, until I opened my eyes. I was back in my apartment, on the couch, gasping, sound flooding back into the world like a tidal wave. The hum of the refrigerator, the buzz of a streetlight outside, my own ragged, desperate breathing. But something was wrong. I tried to call out, just to hear my voice, but what came wasn't mine. The sound that escaped was a chorus of voices, layered and distorted. The voices of all those frozen souls. My words belonged to them now. In the window's reflection, I saw myself, but instead of my face, I saw smooth, polished glass staring back. The broker was gone, and I had taken his place.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales.